So, Evan, thanks so much for taking the time here. I know you're on location right now, taking time out of your evening. Wanted to dive deep on a bunch of topics here on basically rollout, publishing, and incorporating agents into work after you've sort of maybe built the first solution, how you iterate, things like that. So, I guess a first sort of establishing question to ask would be really, what was your work before Glide? You were at Liberty Steel. What was your role there? What was the kind of day-to-day work that you were doing?
Yeah, so when I was at Liberty Steel and Wire, my role was a digital transformation lead, and prior to that, I was running our Microsoft 365 environment there. And I was using Glide personally at the time, but when I brought Glide into Liberty and we were on the Glide Enterprise plan, what happened was very quickly we found that there was like so much value in that and so much more value than me just handling our 365 stuff. So that's when I moved into the role of a digital transformation lead. And over the course of the first year, we launched 9 different apps that handled various different parts of the business. And it was fun because I would just run around Liberty. I worked remotely, but I'd come into the office for like a day and run around the office and ask different departments. I'm like, what are you doing with this sheet? I heard that you use this Excel sheet, or I heard that we're writing this on paper. What's going on here? And we just talk about it. And then I'd bring back some crude version of the app, and then we'd iterate on that time and time again. So as a digital transformation lead, it was my job to sniff out those different like operational issues and then figure out a way to solve them. And some of them were really easy. Coined the term same day ship, where it was somebody would reach out and we'd ship an app that same day. Other ones were months of like scoping to try to figure out what was going on for, I mean, 20, 30-year-old processes that were incredibly difficult to do, but we were all confident that it could be done in Glide.
So I've heard you mention this thing called just-in-time building, which I think is very closely related to this idea of iteration, which is so core to this work of rolling out agents in organizations. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about what you mean by that phrase.
Yeah, so just-in-time building is really something that is my favorite part of building in Glide. And that's that I don't actually think I could do traditional software development because I couldn't take the excitement that comes around a scoping call of people getting their problem solved and then not like capitalize that on that in the moment. So just in time building is usually we can build most of the app that people want in like one good sprint. And then we can do revisions and iterate on that in the like review call. So can we move this here? Can we add this feature? I like to describe it as like the skeleton is built out and we're just like kind of dressing it up at the end. So all the things that people request at the end are just little improvements to the main process. And with Glide, you can do that with what I call just-in-time building, where I'm editing a workflow and adding a notification, or changing where a button is, or adding a quick screen so that people can submit feedback or something like that. I can do that on the call with them.
Is iteration really like the only approach, really? Would you say that once you've shipped something, it's really just about iterating it, or are there other ways that you kind of think about it?
So iterating on a build is not the only way that you can build on Glide, the only method that you can do. I like to think that Glide has completely revolutionized the landscape of software development to the point that you can't think about it in terms of traditional software development practices and like project management life cycles and all that. And the reason is since you can iterate so quickly, and since the changes have a lot of guardrails around them because of Glide's ecosystem, it seems silly to me to spend a lot of time on meetings and then going back and planning, and then when you can do the kind of just-in-time building and then show that it works for their cases and then put it in users' hands and test it all within like an hour. So can you run Glide through a traditional development cycle? Yeah, definitely. But I I would even say that there's some apps that are very complex, and so complex that you do need to be a little bit more careful on those things. I think when I talk about just-in-time building, it's like it doesn't need to be perfect when you just started building it, like since it is so easy to change in Glide, get it whatever you think is most of the way there. I like to use the Pareto principle, like 80% of the way there, and then review it with them and call out the shortcomings that you know are there during that call. But you just want to make sure that you're constantly like 80% there and then 80% there. And over time, you just kind of accumulate that. So it's not the only way to build. And at some point, I would say that you need to be a little more cautious depending on the complexity of the app. But I think it's something that, well, maybe 80% of builders should do.
So how do you measure the success of projects in any stage, really? Is that something that's quantitative, qualitative? Is it just sort of a gut feeling that you have? Like, how do you think about that?
I think there's early indicators on a project on whether or not it's going to be successful. And one of these things is I think Glide has this really special thing that it does where you see people light up and get really excited about their job again. And when you show them the app and that's what they're doing, you can tell that the adoption within the business is just going to be so high because if they're excited about it, they're going to spread that excitement through the organization and show it off. And others in the organization are going to have that same excitement because I mean, some of the problems that we solve every day with Glide are problems that people have been looking at for 5 to 10 years and are just like, I don't really have a better answer for this or a better answer without spending a ton of money and hiring a development team to figure it out. So when I'm measuring like the success of a project, I guess it's like that early spark will give me like an early indication, but then like user adoption is a really big key for that. And then also just like the usage of the app. Is everything going through the app now? Or do you still have part of the business wanting to run a different way? And if that's the case, that's where the iteration does come back in. And it's like, okay, why aren't they using it? And now we can maybe carve out a part of the app that specifically works with those people to find and fix whatever they weren't happy with the original build.
Nice. So do you think of your builds across all of the things you've done? Can you kind of, you might not have a process, but like, can you see particular patterns or stages of rollout?
Yeah, I'd say there are recognizable stages to a rollout. And it's something like, for me at least, where it's like stakeholder, point of contact, review. And they use it and we ask them to go through some different scenarios themselves. And then we go ahead and maybe launch like the stakeholders department or the department that the app is targeting. And or maybe like just a few people within that department. And that stage may be where they're still doing the old process, but then working in the app in parallel and comparing outcomes. And then we launch into like, I would say like a full beta where it's expected that everybody is using that app and reporting feedback during that period. And with the option of moving back to the other if there's really, really big issues. And then rolling that out too and like launching it live and maybe doing like a company announcement and stuff like that. So I think that's something like how I like to roll it out is through those different stages.
And how do you or the organization kind of deal with feedback? Do you build that into the app? Are there kind of other processes or advice or tips that you can kind of give people to sort of integrate that, the kind of like feedback that comes through those iteration cycles?
One method of collecting feedback that we've been using for a little bit here at Glide is putting a feedback form straight into the app. And since you can have multiple apps connect to each other in Glide, you can just have a feedback table and then put the same like form container on top of that in every single app. And then you may have just a feedback app that can drive different feedback from different apps. Which apps have the most feedback? What is the sentiment of the apps across the organization? Maybe even pulling up like different departments that different users are part of and being able to analyze across like, well, marketing's really enjoying it, but accounting's having an issue, but maybe accounting's app is really large and like had a lot of change to it. So maybe there's like a change thing. So, but feedback in the app is a great way to do that. And just you can just plop a form, collect what users submitting that, and what app they're using, and then pop that in a feedback table and build another app real quick that you can review all that, respond to users and stuff like that.
So how do you know when to kind of expand the feature set of an existing tool or agent, or when to sort of break out and create more software? Because it seems like, yeah, if something's going well in an organization, if adoption of Glide is going well, they're going to want to sort of build and find more solutions and things like that. And I'm always interested, sometimes you see these very large apps that are very huge with huge, like lots and lots of different pages. And sometimes people like to have this kind of like very distinct, clear use cases that are kind of minimal. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you launch a project, I would urge you not to put a bunch of agents within the app. And the reason is it can be kind of overwhelming and actually be a little bit redundant, especially since when we're launching these things, maybe we're not actually sure where an agent's needed for sure. And so you end up spending a lot of time fixing prompts and fixing workflows and stuff that you didn't actually need to do. But what you can see is like after a while, you can see where people are actually spending time at in the app, and Posthog's a great way to do that. You can see where they're spending time and when they're writing a lot of information or reviewing a lot of information within the app, and maybe that's where you can put an agent to then speed up that specific time. I think it's important to try to have feature parity early on in the app build, and then identify one key area where you just know AI will thrive. Because you also have the problem right now of like AI adoption and AI fear and people not believing that it'll actually help them in their job. So maybe you'll have people not wanting to use the app for that reason. So you want to put it somewhere where everybody's impressed with what it's doing, so that when the other agent comes out in another part of the app, they're excited to try it and not like, I'm not using that, it's never useful.
Maybe it'd be useful to give some context to people here who are kind of new to this work about the kind of stakeholders that you're dealing with here. Like, is it just the CEO? Is it like the head of ops? Are there multiple people? And kind of what's your relationships like to those different people as you're building? Any tips or advice from on the ground work that you've done?
Yeah, usually actually the stakeholders that I'm talking to are managers, the C-suite, VPs, stuff like that. But as a builder, I want to hear what they want to tackle, but then I want to get in with users as quickly as possible. I want to like live the life that they live for a little bit and see and hear their pain so that I can accurately address them. Because sometimes it's like a game of telephone. Like they're reporting up what their issues are, and they're kind of translating that with like user feedback, but also like company missions and values. So sometimes like the what we could end up building doesn't actually align to the actual process that the user wants. And also there's a lot of variables that come into effect with users, like where are they using the app? What are they using it on? We run into this sometimes where it's like expected that they use their personal phones, but the personal phones don't have access to the company internet, and then you're relying on data to update and run AI and all that stuff. So in data and potentially like a warehouse building or something like that where you don't have great reception. So you really want to understand from all perspectives what is actually going to happen, where they're using it, how they're using it. I mean, sometimes even it's like, okay, they're using an iPad. Well, like if they're carrying the iPad and it's not setting down on a desk, they're holding it in their left hand, you may want to put the things that they're touching on the right side. Or maybe even give them an option of like select whether they're right-handed or left-handed, so that maybe we can flip those buttons for them so left-handed people can hit on the left side of the screen. So you really want to understand very thoroughly how the users are going to interact with it every day, because they're the ones that have to live with it after it's launched, and their performance may even depend on it. So they're going to want to everybody wants to improve the company that they work for. I have that outlook on life. So it's like, well, when you talk to them, like they want to do their job better, and everybody wants to make things more efficient. So
Okay. So one area I think that's really important, we've covered it in other kind of certifications at Glide, is onboarding. How do you tackle onboarding with agents and these kind of solutions?
it really depends on the app, actually. If I'm building onboarding for business apps, sometimes we just need to get a little bit more information and we just make sure that's filled in before they start using it. Other things like we need to set up not only their user profile, but like a company profile. And like it really depends on the app. But I would say onboarding's very common and it's one of the most important parts of the app to figure out, especially if you're doing like a multi-tenant app or something like that within Glide. You have to figure out onboarding because I mean that's where you're going to have churn if you're worried about that within your app. Adoption could be low if it's an internal app, if people aren't onboarded properly or it's not enjoyable or it's not useful or something like that. I usually like to prove value within the first like 5 seconds of people landing in an app. So like if it's an internal app, maybe that's that Excel spreadsheet that they use that they have to flip through 10 different tabs. The most important information is right at the top of the screen when they load into the app. Like how beautiful is that? But for like more of a SaaS app, multi-tenant app, maybe it's we give a sneak preview of what we've already figured out for them based on their first question that we asked them in their onboarding.
So maybe it would be great to just really zoom out here and just like answer the question, what does it look like when adoption is working really well in an organization? When the adoption of Glide, when the business is really understanding and sort of like making great use of it.
Yeah, so when a business is really adopting Glide, it looks something like this. Like the first person to bring it in builds an app and they're excited about it. Their coworkers are excited about that. And somebody else within the organization is going, hey, can you build me an app that does this? I see a parallel to what you built in my problem. It's like the first key thing that you can identify if adoption is like something that your business is willing to do with Glide. If people are asking you for apps, realize that they are like in pain with the current process. So when they bring that to you, understand that it's not being done lightly. They're not trying to waste your time with just another app build. When I was at Liberty, it looked something like we built this like first HR app and also an app for like all the company to request funding for different projects. And over the next month, it was like I was constantly in meetings. I was constantly getting emails with Excel spreadsheets, like how does this look within an app and stuff like that. That's a really, really good sign. And it's really something to take serious and talk with your team and maybe your IT team about like what does Glide adoption look like at our company at a large scale, because obviously there is a pain happening and you can see how this applies to all of it.
Okay, cool. Nice. Okay, great. It's so lovely to hear. Yeah, so I guess then the opposite question of that, like when does adoption get blocked? Like what are the kind of things that you see? Like if there was one thing that you had to choose, like what's the main issue that kind of happens?
Glide adoption gets blocked specifically at one step, I would say. And if you could conquer this one step, it never gets blocked, and then you end up you end up having people bring every problem to you. And that's really just structured data and whether or not like you can translate that 10-year-old Excel file that everybody's been working in and keeps copying and duplicating, and it's like the 47th copy of the year because you copy it every week just in case it breaks or something like that. And you look at that and you can understand how that translates into like Glide big tables and or like is that a spreadsheet that's generated out of your SQL server and you already have that information in a database format and you can connect it straight into Glide. That's where you will fight an uphill battle is it's very time consuming to unravel the depths of those like really crazy Excel spreadsheets or some like PDF report that your 20-year-old ERP system spits out every week or something like that, and that's what everybody looks at. AI helps with that quite a bit because I mean maybe that report can be processed and turned into a data style with our workflows feature, but it's almost always at that step where people get a little demotivated because the the data hygiene, the data structure is just not good throughout the company. So every single time you attack a problem, insanely difficult to work on.
Okay. So another angle to all of this is obviously the business is already in progress. It's already running. Operations is going, and perhaps the solution that you're building is taking over certain things. But very likely, what's going to be happening, especially if you're iterating these projects, is that you're going to be having to integrate this with other systems that are sort of already running. So, yeah, what's been your experience there? Like, is it easy? Is it straightforward? How should people approach that?
Yeah, Glide works great with other systems. And I can say that almost always there's a way to go forward with connecting that, whatever system you're thinking of, with Glide. It may not be an integration in our list. The API docs may not be extremely straightforward. There may be some hoops to jump through, but if it's something that could potentially be saving a company hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, it's probably worth it to figure out what those hoops are. And and I also urge you to reach out to us at Glide and the Glide Solutions team to figure out what may be the best way forward for some of those systems, and we can brainstorm on that together.
So I'm interested when you're like on the ground with businesses and people like yourself, solution builders, like, do you find yourself essentially pitching Glide inside of an organization, like, or outside of the organization?
Do I find myself pitching or explaining Glide to other departments? I find myself pitching or just talking about Glide to like people in line at the ice cream parlor. Like it's so easy to talk about because people will, at like a personal level, people will say like, oh, I'm trying to put together information for my kid's birthday party, and that date is just really scattered. and and I'll like kind of instantly go like take like an hour maybe to throw together a simple app where people can say like their kids' food allergies and what the best dates of the month are for them to attend a birthday party or something like that. And maybe we'd use AI to figure out exactly what that is. So on a personal level, I sometimes think of those things. But on a business level, almost every single business problem I I can envision a Glide solution working for them. There's some scenarios where it is just better. Like there's some out of the box tools that are just really good at what they do. And if you already own it or are already using it, I'd urge you to explore that rather than trying to reinvent it. There are just some things that are the same everywhere, and out of the box solutions do that. So, or handle that really well.
Inherent to agents is the models that underlie the AI that we put in our apps. And I wonder whether you just got any thoughts on that really. Like obviously you're using Glide AI all the time. Are you using other systems or other models? Yeah, any reflections on the actual experience of the models, maybe how they improve, how that impacts the actual software?
So I'm going to take this in two different ways. Glide AI is one of the first things I always think of using when I'm using AI. And that's just because all the communication and the API keys and all that fun stuff is taken care of for you. And you just kind of plop a Glide AI node in your workflow or plop it in your table, and suddenly you have AI enabled apps. I like to say that Glide is the best way to put AI next to your data because, and really the easiest way. And I think it's the best way because it's the easiest and secure and safe and all these different things. So if I can use Glide AI, I use Glide AI. Now, I will say there's very specific instances where a good example is I really enjoy the way that Claude from Anthropic writes. So if I need something that has a little bit more creativity or more natural sounding speech and writing, I will kind of bite the bullet and build out a workflow that uses Claude and updates things with that. And in terms of like updating those, sometimes it's just as easy as just swapping out the model in the call. Other times it is we may swap out the model and put it in another workflow for a test workflow first, depending on the seriousness of the app. I will usually do that, but yeah, usually it's just a matter of just swapping out the model. But I'd say most of the time I'm using Glide AI.
So Glide has always been a tool that allows you to build interface on top of data with action and now automation. But now with the sort of the increase in the automation capabilities of Glide, there's such an opportunity now to be able to create apps that aren't used by people. There's sort of headless or back-end apps. Like, do you make many of those?
Yeah, headless apps are a really fun thing. I like to say I like to call them appless apps just because I think it's kind of fun. But these appless apps, the whole point is sometimes I just want to have a place where all my workflows are working, and and maybe there's multiple apps that ping off of that. That's usually the biggest case is I've built something incredibly strong and I want to use it across apps. And like when you have like webhook triggers and stuff like that, you can obviously trigger them from anywhere. And with linked Glide data tables, you can edit that data in another app that's a headless app and then move that to the table, and then it shows up in all the apps that use that data table. So yeah, the headless solutions is something that I think as a community and as like builders we haven't fully tapped yet. I think it's still a little bit of uncharted territory, but it's something I've been playing with as well.
Yeah, that is something that's very new for us. I'm excited to see what the community does. Sort of wrapping up now, one we kind of touched on this a little bit, but like in the iteration kind of discussion, but I'm interested in how you or organizations review solutions, like after a certain amount of time or at certain stages. Like what's the process for that? If something's gotten to a certain level, is there a kind of a review process?
Reviewing solutions is interesting because with Glide, when you build it and it's working, it just works. You don't really have to worry about it too often. I will review solutions when new features come out with Glide that drastically improve the user's experience within the app. And I'll build out and rebuild a certain portion of that because maybe I had an idea early on, but like that wasn't quite possible at the time. I can't really think of an exact scenario, but there are times where a feature, a component, workflows is a big example from earlier this year where I just need to rebuild part of it. Another time is when you get workflow or actions error notifications on an app. Depending on the frequency of those, it's best to track those down as soon as possible and try to figure out what's going on, because if it's happening to one person, it can happen to everyone. So figuring out what's going on in that's happening with that.
So you are like going into business, your particular role is going into businesses and setting this kind of solution up, potentially training people in the business. Like are you, and then you have to go because you're going off to build other amazing things. Are you training or assigning people in the business to be like the main builder there? Like, do you transfer kind of ownership, so to speak, and any advice around that?
Yeah, after rolling out, I think it's really hard as a builder. What you'll find is, like I've said, you have all these people bringing you all these different issues within their company, and you're thinking of different solutions. So it's very hard for you to continue thinking forward on every single solution across the business. I think it's very possible nowadays, with how easy it is to build in Glide, that you can have 20 apps within your first year. Well, you're not using all those apps every single day. You're not sitting in the builder in those apps every single day. So I think it's up to the departments, just like how they brought you the original issue or the original pain point. They will always find something that they say, well, I think this could be a little bit better. And I think it's just worth it to talk and review with your stakeholders and points of contact that and ask them like, what's going well, it's not going well, what features or what things do you wish you had in this, and just talk it over with them. I think assigning it to someone that's closer to the app's purpose is way better than you as a builder like trying to test it once a month or anything like that.
Evan, thank you so much for this. This is really helpful. I think it'll be a really long but good kind of podcast style lesson to kind of round off the course. Any kind of final thoughts on this topic area?
I mean, it's so fun. Like I'm sitting here in the hotel room on a Glide deploy for RDG USA, and my point of contact here, when I show him things that I'm building, and show him things I'm building for them, and what new features just are like rolling out in private beta, like to see someone that's been with a company for 35 years, that's been working on innovating the company and moving the company forward technology wise for 35 years, and see them get like giddy about the possibilities and how so many things that you used to just kind of shrug your shoulders and say that's the way it is, and see them now like realize that it's possible to fix that. It's something truly special, and like it makes me feel like we're on like some higher level mission at Glide. So really fun stuff. So thanks for bringing me in on that. I hope that works for you.
Absolutely, mate. There's been a total pleasure. I learned a ton from your work, so appreciate it.